Good morning, friends. Today we have gathered for the second lecture of
Neutrons and
and
probe
probe
of
of
condensed
condensed
matter.
matter. Today, 7th October, is a very important day because of few things. One, today is the birthday of Niels Bohr, the person who gave the structure of an atom, which later went ahead and we found that the nucleus does have a particle called neutrons. Yesterday, more importantly, also for those of us who are in the country, was the birthday of great M.N. Saha,
who was
nominated
nominated
7
7 times
times
for
for
Nobel
Nobel
Prize
Prize for his
for his
work
work
on
on
astrophysics.
astrophysics.
And I know there are some students from SINP. I think as an Indian, all of as Indians, we all are proud of such a character being born in not independent India. And lastly, I must mention that few hours back, 19-20 hours back, this year's Nobel Prize in Physics has been announced. This has gone to three persons. One is Roger Penrose, and one is a lady in Caltech. I've forgotten the
third name.
Roger Penrose, you may be aware of the great friend of Subramaniam Chandrasekhar, who has also done great work in astrophysics. So Subramaniam Chandrasekhar got his Nobel Prize in astrophysics, and we all of us know that Chandrasekhar limit of 1.4 times solar mass can become a black hole of a star. And Roger Penrose's work is also in astrophysics, prediction of black holes, possibly a very important theoretical work
Based on Einstein's general
general
relativity.
relativity.
To some extent,
Our course also relates to one of the things of astrophysics that we know that before a star goes black hole, becomes black hole, it goes through a phase called neutron star, which an object which has got 95% of its mass neutrons, because electrons go and merge with the protons in the nucleus, and what remains is mostly neutrons. So that's a neutron star, which is composed almost of neutron. So with these few anecdotes, now let us get into the course on neutrons as probe of condensed matter. These are the neutrons which come from nuclear reactors, and I have just introduced you to the formalism for calculating the neutron scattering cross sections, which you will need again and again in this course.
So
So
these are
this is
lecture
lecture 2,
in
in which I will be dealing diffraction. Diffraction that gives you structure of a material. I will request you to accept diffraction is in a little more general terms, which gives structure at various length scales. I mean, when we talk about diffraction in neutron scattering, it includes structure at the microscopic level, at the atomic level, crystallographic level. That means we can see crystal structures like you see in with X-ray diffraction. It can also look at objects at slightly more gross length scales, at nanometer length scales, using polarized neutron reflectometry or small angle neutron scattering, which will be discussed in reasonable details in some later lectures. So, with this much of introduction, let me
give
you a small reminder of what I did. Actually, I introduced you to the potential known as Fermi pseudo potential. Here, Fermi considered the nucleus to be a delta function potential with respect to a neutron wavelength of angstrom, which is reasonable because our nucleus is a much smaller object, as I told you yesterday. Hello. Of the order of femtometer. So typically around 10 to the minus 5 angstrom size, and it is justified to have it as a delta function. And we have a prefactor a b lambda. This is called the scattering length, and its role I will come later. But later I derived on this that if I have a single nucleus, then d sigma by d omega, scattering cross section per unit solid angle, is given by square of b, and sigma is 4 pi b square. So it indeed gives a scattering cross section. And I just compare it with respect to classical scattering cross section. The quantum mechanical it is 4 times pi b square, whereas it is pi b square, the size of a disk in the path of a classical beam. So this much is evident. Now, let's go
ahead.
Let's consider a rigid lattice. When I say rigid lattice, I can also say that I'm considering a lattice without any dynamics. So I have an arrangement of atoms, whether regular or irregular, we'll come to it later. But we have nucleus fixed or atoms fixed at specific sites without any dynamics. Now, this rigid lattice composed of atoms sitting at specific places. In this case, for neutron nucleus interaction, I should say nuclei sitting at specific places, and any one of them in general, I can call it the LH site. LH site. When I do this, then this is the total potential given by the provided by the sample in neutron path is this. This is a summation of delta functions, and each side has got a scattering length BL. So I can write it as a sum over delta functions, which comprises the entire crystal, and each side has got a scattering length BL, which is basically will decide how strong the interaction is. And earlier I had explained to you that I derived it in the Born approximation of a structure called F K prime. This I derived, and I had written it in the bracket notation. I will just write it down formally for you. Is given by, as I told you earlier, it is nothing but an integral, three-dimensional integral. The incident wave function is a plane wave function, plane wave, and the wave which has gone out from the sample at far away plane wave at the detector. So what I am measuring is actually is all vectors, potential V. So this I can write as it is e to the power iq dot r and the potential. So this is basically a Fourier transform of the potential that gives me the what we call a scattering amplitude. The scattering amplitude f of k prime. Square of this scattering amplitude gives me the scattering cross section per unit solid angle. So this is a Fourier transform, and here in this case, this V of r for a rigid lattice is given by a summation over L, some constant factors, BL delta R minus RL, where the nuclei are sitting at site else. It's a summation over all the sites, the other summation over the entire crystal. I hope this part is clear to you. I will stop in between, and if you have any comments, you may please give it. I am stopping now, and if anybody has any confusion anywhere, please give your comments. I'll stop for 20 seconds. Any comments? Not yet. My request to you that you need not wait till the end of the lecture. At such places, I will stop, give you a comment. If not, I will go ahead. I am waiting for your comment because otherwise the classroom texture is not maintained. So please give me your comments, otherwise I will go ahead. I'll assume that it is clear to you, especially the students. Others, it may be basics for them, and people may just skip. No comments? Okay, so then I profit from this point. So as I told you that so I evaluated this f k of k prime, and I showed you that this is a Fourier transform of the nuclear potential summed over all the sides, and the square of this will give me the scattering cross section per unit solid angle, which is basically elastic scattering cross section. So I showed you that this there is k prime vk, which comes down to, I'll write it for you. So this part is clear. I'll remove it. So now my is equal to so these are all delta functions. When I integrate over the entire space, what I am left with basically, all these R's, they'll be replaced by RL, summation over RL. It is BL e to the power I Q dot RL. This is my scattering amplitude. And then now this is the most interesting part of neutron scattering, and different from all other forms of scattering, that now that I have a BL or scattering length, I have to sum over this, and now I also have, actually I just did it between k and k prime, but the total scattering cross section will be written like this. It will be written like this. It will be K prime, sigma prime, lambda prime, V, K, lambda, sigma, and square of it. That will decide the scattering cross section. Here, so a neutron of momentum vector K prime, K for the all possible quantum conditions of the target, lambda of neutron spin sigma goes to a scattering vector K prime, spin sigma prime, and all possible final states of the system lambda prime. And this is basically nothing but a transition amplitude that we define in quantum mechanics, and square of that gives you the transition probability, and that is nothing but a scattering cross section under the action of this potential V. In brief, the description of this expression is that. Now I have showed you that K prime V K that gave us e to the power I q dot r. But now I'm still left with these two. These are the initial and final states of the neutron, final state of the neutron and the system, initial state of neutron in the system. So I still have to do sorry, I just mixed them, but this is what I have to find out. And this is where the neutron cross section is different from all others, because so now this expression says that sorry. So my scattering cross section per solid angle depends on this integral. K prime and K has already been included here, and I am doing it P lambda P sigma. All probabilities for initial state lambda, summing over all of them. All probabilities for the initial spin state sigma, P sigma, I'm summing over them, and also summing over all the final states. Now there's a small trick. Small trick is that this integral, let me go to the palette and write to you. So show you. Please note. For most of you, these are already known from MSc days, but I am going slow and I want everybody to be at par while we derive the final expression. This I can write like this. So this is a square. That means there are two integrals. I have broken them, and the two integrals from this, one is A, then this is the complex conjugate of that, and this is the integral A. So A square is A star A, which I have written like this. Now there is a summation over lambda prime sigma prime. I'll go back and I'll show you. That means I have to sum up all the states, all the final states of the system and neutron. Now there is one more completeness thing in quantum mechanics, that if I add up over all the future states, so, and I sum them all over lambda prime sigma prime, this should give me 1. This statement is nothing but to say that when I add up all the components of a vector, then ultimately it should give me the vector itself. That means sum of square of all the dilation cosines should give me 1. This statement is just a quantum mechanical version regarding projection of. So basically this gives me the projection operator, and when I add them up, square them up of any wave function psi, I get sum over components of psi, and that should give me the psi cell. With that,
So that's
that's
what I
what I
wrote
wrote
here.
here. That I have to do
A
sum
sum over
over all the initial states, all the final states, but when I broke up this integral, I get this projection operator, I put it equal to 1, and what I'm left with actually average over this. Now, this expression is the basically the diffraction term for neutrons, because when I do, again I'll go back to the palette and I will explain to you. So it is and there's a summation and there's a square. When I break this, I get a term which is dummy variable for the CL and sum. There's a double sum because when I broke this square, I get two dummy variables L and L prime, and that comes to this term comes, and I need an average between lambda sigma and lambda sigma, because there is summation over LL prime and there is a BL prime BL. This is nothing but the scattering amplitude at L prime side and the scattering amplitude at L side. Now let us go back to the expression and see. So I need to do I need to do a summation over all the initial states. I need to do an averaging between the initial states of the system and of the neutron for this scattering amplitude BL prime BL is the complement BL star BL prime star BL. I need to find this out. Now, why I am going through this exercise? Because I will like to tell you that when we are doing X-ray diffraction, in case of X-ray diffraction, it is the bound electron charge cloud that is responsible for the electron diffraction. And if I take any sample, let's say nickel, the nickel charge cloud does not change from one side to another side. It remains same, even it does not change if I go from nickel 60 to nickel 62. So this charge cloud is independent of the isotope or the site electron where the electron cloud is there. But in case of neutron, two things. Neutron comes with a spin half, so it's a half minus half. The interaction is neutron with nucleus, with a nucleus, and this is unique because the neutron nucleus interaction depends on the spin of the neutron and the spin of the nucleus. And I must tell you that nuclear spin is very difficult to align them. One, the nuclear spin is much weaker because the nucleus is almost 2000 times lighter than, sorry, heavier than electron, and the moments are equally 2000 times less. So at any temperature, you will find the nuclear spins are random. So that means now the scattering cross section depends whether your neutron and nuclear spins are parallel or anti-parallel, and they are changing randomly because there is temperature fluctuations, and so I have to do an averaging to find out what is the average scattering cross section. And so that means from site to site, depending on the nuclear spin and its relative orientation with the neutron spin, the scattering amplitude is different, and I need to do an averaging to find out what is the final result. This is unique for neutrons, and that's why I'll show you shortly that we get what is known as coherent and incoherent cross section in case of neutrons. So now I will denote an averaging which is this average is over the all states and all sites, all the initial states. Now, when I do an averaging over the nuclear spins, then automatically all the possible orientations P sigma goes to 1. So that means finally I need to do this averaging for the entire sample to get the value of average value of BLBL star, and this is the thing which I need to plug in to this expression. This BL prime star BL I need to plug in here, and then sum over all LL prime, and I will get the angle dependent scattering amplitude. Again, I will stop here, and I will request if there is something which you don't understand, which is confusing, where you have any questions, you can ask me right now through your comments, and I will try to answer now. I will wait for 20 seconds, and then I will. Okay. Okay. So I find two comments here. One is that it says, can we get the reference of the same from which the expression and the compiled derivations has been taken? Any book or paper? Sure. You can read Bacon, G. Bacon on neutron scattering and theory of neutron scattering by, I'll write it down later, Lovesay, Marshall and Lovesay, that you can see. I'll give you that. So from there you can read these books, these things. Also, there is Methods of Experimental Physics, volume 23A, which is on neutron scattering. You can see the first chapter is the Methods of Experimental Physics, and this is edited by D.L. Price. I'll write down the name for you. So somebody asked me that. So G. No, this is one of the books which we followed. This is another book, Theory of Thermal Neutron Scattering. This is one. This is one. And there's methods of experimental physics, volume 23A, edited by D.L. Price. So this has got many chapters, but the first chapter on theory, you can get these derivations. You need to have just the basic knowledge of quantum mechanics, just a bit of scattering theory and Born approximation, and then it will be very easy for you to follow these chapters. So I hope this is clear. So now let me go back to what I was doing to finish today. So as I told you, so there is an averaging over all possible initial states of the targets and neutron. And I told you that if I do the averaging over the target, then it will automatically take care of the averaging of the spin of neutrons, because neutrons spin half and it can be either plus half or minus half with respect to the target. So scattering cross section depends on several things, because it's a neutron nuclear interaction. So one is that it depends on the nuclear spin, and in turn it also depends on the isotope. So this is an interesting thing about neutrons, and this is a phenomena which is heavily used by the neutron scattering people, because you see, because there is a difference in scattering length and scattering cross section from isotope to isotope. That means hydrogen and deuterium, they are very different with respect to each other when it comes to scattering length. Actually, hydrogen has got a negative scattering length, deuterium has a positive scattering length, and you can mix the two and you can see okay. I'll come to this question. So isotope. So you can mix the two, and you will find in some of the lectures that you can really, like I can make a combination of H2O and D2O, and I can make a system which has got zero scattering length density. This is the most interesting thing, and this is heavily used by people who are working in chemistry and biology using neutrons. So this is called contrast variation, and I will not get too much into it. Why and how, I'll come to that. And this technique will be described by Professor Aswal when he later talks about it in small angle neutron scattering. So after saying this, let me now go ahead. And so this thing doesn't happen in case of X-rays. By Tawhid Rahman, he says, deriving the scattering amplitude, how can you relate with the diffraction? You see, I derived fkk prime for you, right? And then when I did d sigma by d omega, this expression, and then when I expanded it, this is, you see this, oh, sorry, 1 second. Please, you look at this expression. What is this? E to the power I q dot RL minus RL prime. This is the phase factor. You go from one side to another, to another, to another. This phase factor changes, and you are adding them up. You see, this is a summation. So you have got a summation of phase factors. That's what is diffraction all about. That's all the diffraction is all about. You have different distances, you have different phase factors. So there will be, and this will decide whether this phase factor will make these things add or subtract, and this will give the diffraction pattern. So this is what the diffraction is all about, and which I'm getting into. I will derive the same thing in the next lecture. I will do the same thing which we have done in MSc, in masters, or I don't know, even sometimes in the undergraduate level also, for X-rays. When I derive this, you will find the one-to-one correspondence between X and neutron. This is what I'm talking about, is diffraction only, because it's for a rigid lattice, and this is what the expression is all about. I hope, Mr. Tawhidar, I have answered your question. So let me go ahead. Now I have to do this averaging. This is important. So I told you that the neutron and the nuclear spin, that dictates the scattering length, and depending on the relative orientation, the scattering length changes. So I need to do an averaging and use it in my expression. So now I have got an expression. I have to find out this. I have to find out, and so let's. So this is what I want to find out with all the probabilities for the initial state lambda. This lambda is not wavelength or energy of the neutrons. This is basically all possible quantum states of the neutron. I have clubbed it under lambda. I don't know what they are, but they describe the entire not neutron, sorry, the scattering system and its quantum mechanical state. Yes. Now there are two kinds of cross sections for neutrons: coherent, incoherent cross section. Now let me just go back to the blackboard. So now I have to do an averaging and sum them over L and L prime. Now let us consider that the isotopes and the spins of the nucleus, they are randomly distributed. That's correct. I mean, if there is, let us say nickel 60, if there is 0.1% nickel 62. So just by using probability, I can put, if I take a site, 99.9% probability is nickel 60 and 0.1% that it is nickel 62. So I have to do that averaging on these things. So when L is not equal to L prime, then this distribution, they're uncorrelated, right? So I can do the averaging separately. I can take out the two sides separately and do the averaging. So this averaging will be separately done. This is a symbol for averaging. I can do it separately. And when I do it over the entire sample, this averaging, they will turn out to be same. This is the same average scattering length. So that means when L is not equal to L prime, this breaks open, and they are the same value. So I can write it as B average, and in that expression there is a square formula. So now let me go back to the transfer. So when L is not equal to L prime, in the double summation, the summation over L prime, you have to choose two terms for these phase factors. For a second. So there is just 1 second. So there is a double summation, and in the double summation, in the two terms, when they are not to the, they don't indicate to the same side, then I can do average separately, and this one for L not equal to L prime, it's B average and square of that. And when they belong to the same side, L equal to L prime, then it gives at that side a scattering the square B square and average of that. So I have got a B average square and B square average of that. You see, if you take any system, that the fluctuation, the mean is B bar, the fluctuation is there around this mean, and you can write it as B average square by B square average, and this is the fluctuation around the mean. This is true for any system, whether it's a system of numbers or anything, that B square, its average, and average is square. So this gives the fluctuation around the mean, and this gives the mean value. So I have two terms. I have got an average value of the scattering length, and I have got a fluctuation around mean in that from the sample. Now, what does it mean so far as the scattering term is concerned? So now I told what I told you just now. I have square and its average when in the summation series L prime, there are terms when L equal to L prime, that gives me B square average, and when L is not equal to L prime, then it gives me B. Sorry, I'm sorry. This is the L equal to L prime when it gives me B square average, and when L is not equal to L prime, it gives me B average square. With that, so now my d sigma by d omega is given by this expression. There is little something somewhere I went for. No? This expression should look like this. This expression looks like I q dot r l minus l prime. This expression is somehow I made a mistake, and now I do a small trick. This average in terms of 2. I write it B square, B average square plus delta LL prime, B square average minus B average square. This expression envisages that when L is not equal to L prime, then this goes to 0. You have B average square. And when L is equal to L prime, then B square average minus B average square, these two terms will cancel, and you are left with B square average. So what I told you just now, this expression basically mathematically implements that in this expression, and I'll put it here. B square average, B square plus delta LL prime, B square average minus B average square. Now please see, this is the fluctuation around, and this is the mean. This is the mean. With these two, when I plug it in d sigma by d omega, I have two terms. We call it d sigma d omega coherent and d sigma d omega incoherent. Why? It'll come in a minute. When I substitute this in this, I get the coherent term is like this. Just now somebody asked me, so this term is B average square e to the power I q dot RL minus RL prime. This depends on structure. This depends on structure, and this is a Q dependent part. This will give you the Q dependence in your d sigma by d omega. That's what is diffraction all about. When you do X-ray diffraction, when you do neutron diffraction, you see structures like this. You see structures like this. familiar with error diffraction. These are the diffraction peaks coming from this term. And with Q, you do these experiments as a function of Q, or more popular as a function of theta, and for diffraction experiment Q is equal to 4 pi by lambda sine theta. So this Q, and this is your intensity. So this is the diffraction term. But look at the second term, delta M L equal to L prime. So you get this. The summation reduces to only 1. So you multiply then B square average minus B average square. Now this one term does not have any angle dependence. Let me say have a Q dependence. So if I plot these as a function of theta, it is angle independent. So it will be like this, a straight line. Whatever is that will give some intensity, and it will not change with angle. So this is called incoherent because this does not have any signature of coherence and phase factor in the two sides. This is independent of side. This is just an average picture of the sample which gives an incoherent background. So this is the coherent structure. This is an incoherent structure. I will show you how to calculate this, but
we have the same slide.
oh, just give me a second. It seems you have some people have slide issue. Let me just repair it and then we'll start it again. I understand that there are some slide issues, so I think I'll go back and I'll try to go slowly over the whole thing once again so that there is no mismatch between what I'm showing and what you see. Go slow. So I started an average of the scattering length BL prime star BL over all the initial states of the system. This is I find out. So I told you that there are two breakup terms in this summation series. One is when L is equal to L prime. That means BL and BL prime are same. So that is square of the term B square, and this I have to do an average over the entire crystal, and then I get this B square average. This is in the double summation. This is the this clubs the terms where L is equal to L prime. You have to do the summation over n equal to 10 to the power 23, typically Avogadro's number of the sites. We also have terms where L is not equal to L prime. When L is not equal to L prime, then we are saying that the two sites are not correlated. Nuclear spin and isotope over here is not correlated to nuclear spin and isotope over here. So I can do the averaging separately for the entire crystal. And when I do that, I'll get the average, which is B average, and then it will be squared. So it is a B average square. So I have B square average and B average square. Once you have understood this, Then went to the next stage. I wrote down this summation in which I have the phase factor. This is wrong here. I'll again correct it for you. Expression problem. So here, this term, it is e to the power I q dot RL minus RL prime. This is the term. Some of the brackets are slightly wrong. It is q dot RL, it will go here. So once I do that, then I have to plug in this average of this thing with this expression. And when I do that, the one term is B average square when L is not equal to L prime, then I have this expression. This is the diffraction. Sometimes back somebody asked me a question, how we correlate with diffraction. This is the diffraction term. This diffraction term, when you see in an experiment, this d sigma by d omega, when I plot it as a function of q, or more popularly as a function of theta, the intensity shows me structures. The structures in q space are related to the structure in real space. This more I'll talk about this later. But if you see this expression, it has no q dependence. Since it has no q dependence, if I measure it, try to measure it in an experiment, I will see constant background. It will not have any q dependence. So these are the terms. This is known as coherent scattering cross section. This is known as incoherent scattering cross section. So once these two you have understood, then you will realize that this is unique about neutrons because the neutron nuclear interaction is spin dependent. So it varies from one side to another, and because of that, I have this issue of an average and fluctuation around the average. The fluctuation around the average gives me incoherent scattering cross section, and the mean scattering cross section gives me the diffraction in the system. So when one good example, I'll tell you why shortly. That hydrogen, many of us who are in neutron scattering who know that hydrogen is a very strong scatterer of neutrons, but hydrogen is predominantly an incoherent scatterer. So if you want to find out the structure of a, for example, an organic crystal, organic thing which has got hydrogen in it, you will be advised to deuterate it, which is a coherent scatterer. And otherwise, the hydrogen will just give you a background. So with this much, let me go ahead. So this is what I told you just now, that neutrons has a coherent and incoherent part in its cross section, and the incoherent part has no angle dependence. It is called a background, and the coherent part shows you this kind of peak structure. Now the next question comes, how calculate the incoherent and coherent scattering length? I will repeat this in the next lecture. I'll just introduce you to this part, and then I'll stop today and I'll take your comments. You see, for the averaging, there are two kinds of averaging you need to do. As I told you, the nuclear scattering length depends on two things, the isotope and the spin. So you need to do a averaging on isotope and averaging on spin. Now, when you say isotope, if you take any naturally occurring element, it will have a relative abundance. I cannot say for nickel, it might have nickel 68 in certain fraction, or if you take hydrogen, it will have a little bit of deuterium, little bit of tritium. So that abundance tells you what is this Ck. So to find out the average, we have to do summation over the isotopes Ck and scattering length one isotope CkBk. Since I also need to find out the fluctuation around the mean, I also have to find out B square average over the isotopes. So this will be given by Ck and Bk square, just square of that. Once I know this average and this average, I can calculate the incurrent scattering cross section from B square average minus B average square. One more thing, now neutron has a spin of half. And nucleus, any nucleus, I don't know which is your sample, it has got a spin I. So the spin of the system is given by 2 I plus minus half is the total spin twice, because the system has got a spin of I plus minus half, that is the neutron plus nucleus system. When you do that, then the total possible states or projections are twice the one that we know. So that means when I say I plus half, 2 into I plus half plus 1 gives me twice projections. And when I say 2I minus 1, it gives me 2I projections. So these are also the relative weights of these possible systems. When you have I plus half spin, then it has got a weightage of 2I plus 1. When you have I minus half spin for the total system, it has got a weightage of 2I, and I have to average on this. So I have to average on 2I plus Y, 2I plus 2 plus 2I, and 2I plus 2I. I'll show you how to do it in the next lecture. I think today I will stop, and again I will like to discuss with, or first I will wait for some time, 1 or 2 minutes, because now there are some expressions which I have derived which may not be clear to you. I will again request you to give me your comments. I will look at them. Otherwise, I will summarize once again and then stop today. Please. Hello. You can, if you don't have any question right now, or you are not sure whether you want to ask it or not, I can tell you that you can always send me your queries at neutroncourse@gmail.com. I'll write here for you. Next lecture is on Friday from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Most of your lectures have been scheduled between 3 and 4 in the afternoon, and sometimes you have some programs or meetings for which I had to shift it slightly. Even in future, in case situation demands, I might have to shift. So I'm giving you week-wise program and the links at the site. So on Friday, I will load the complete schedule and the program for the next week. You can always post your questions here, and this is. Yes, you please log into whatever I've talked for last 1 hour. This talk will be loaded onto YouTube HBNI webinar. The link will be given to you. You can see it in your login. Also, the references which I have used, they have already been uploaded actually at your login at www.anuvidya.in. You can log in and you can get the transparencies. So I hope that with the transparencies and with the talk in the YouTube, if you want, you can see the material and you can send your queries. I'll be happy. Actually, I would like to have queries from you because no query is not good. Even if you have some basic questions, some absolutely simple things which might be, you feel it is too obvious, but please don't hesitate to ask. Asking is always good so that we have a dialogue rather than a monologue from one side. And with that, is there any question? Are there any queries? Do you find? I'll wait for a few more seconds and then I will meet you again on Friday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 15 hours.